Jimmy Kimmel cracked a joke on live TV expecting laughs, but Jasmine Crockett's calm reply left him stunned and the audience too. The cameras were already rolling when she walked on stage, steady and confident in black heels and an emerald blazer, her hair pulled into a perfect bun. She shook Jimmy's hand, offered a polite smile, and took her seat as the crowd clapped. With that mix of excitement and routine late-night energy, Jimmy leaned back, flashing the grin he always saves. For politicians, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, he said, the firecracker from Dallas, or should I say the one-woman filibuster machine? Jasmine chuckled briefly, clearly unfazed. You can call me Jasmine, she replied warmly, but I'm nobody's firecracker. The audience laughed, though it was the kind of laugh that left people unsure who the real target was. The interview started light, with jokes about Congress and politics. Jasmine kept it cool, tossing back a few clever jabs of her own. Then Jimmy glanced at his note card and shifted gears. So Jasmine, he said with a smile, you're known for being, let's say, a little spicy. Is that strategy, or do you just wake up ready for a fight? A few chuckles bubbled from the crowd. He pushed on, joking it was like she was auditioning for a Real Housewives spin-off, The Hillwives of Capitol Hill. The room laughed louder, but the pause before it was noticeable. Jasmine didn't join in. Instead, she calmly picked up her mug, took a sip, and set it down. I'll answer that, she said, but let me ask you something first. Jimmy's eyebrows shot up. Do you ever get tired of white guys calling you spicy just because you won't let them talk over you? Jasmine asked. The room froze. It wasn't the awkward silence of a bad joke, it was sharper. Eyes widened. A few people let out that low ooh that slips out when something cuts to close. Jimmy blinked, caught off guard, his usual quick comeback nowhere to be found. Jasmine sat steady, calm and unflinching, like she'd been here before. The air shifted. Not tense, but focused. Everyone was watching now, even the half-distracted ones on their phones. Jimmy let out a nervous laugh. Okay, I walked into that one. No, Jasmine replied evenly. You ran. This time the audience wasn't laughing the same way, and neither was Jimmy. He tapped his note cards against the desk, his nervous tick. Only now it seemed less like nerves and more like he'd lost control of the moment. Well, he muttered, this is already more interesting than the guy who writes fortune cookies. A few polite laughs followed. Jasmine crossed her legs, folded her hands neatly, and stayed silent. She didn't need to say anything. Jimmy tried to push forward. You've been very vocal about, well, pretty much everything. Some people call you bold, some say angry. What would you call it? Jasmine locked eyes with him. Truthful. Jimmy opened his mouth, but no words came. The audience shifted in their seats, realizing the conversation had left behind the late-night act a while ago. He forced out a laugh. Well, sure, truthful is good, but I mean, you've been in some pretty heated exchanges, right? Jimmy asked, do you ever ask Senator Kennedy that? Jasmine replied calmly, or is being heated only an issue when it's a woman? Jimmy blinked, his smile slipping. I think we have a clip. No, her voice stayed steady. Don't play a clip of me unless you're playing clips of everyone else losing their temper. Otherwise, you're not showing the truth, you're selling a version. The crowd stirred, someone in the back even clapping before stopping when no one joined in. Jimmy cleared his throat. Look, Jasmine, I wasn't trying to. I know, she said, softening just a little. But you are. That's the thing, it's baked into how this whole space works. I show up as myself and filtered. Real, and the first thing I get called as spicy. Jimmy looked like he wanted to respond, but Jasmine leaned forward, her expression filling the camera frame. When you say that, what you're really saying is I don't act like the people you're used to watching on this couch. But maybe that's not my problem. Maybe that's yours. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Even the band stayed quiet. Jimmy finally lowered his eyes and nodded. Fair enough, Jasmine leaned back. That's all I wanted. For a few moments, there were no jokes, no applause, just a people on live TV in a moment that felt raw and unscripted. Jimmy wasn't about to let it linger. "Alright," he said, forcing a grin. "Let's talk about something later. You brought your dog, right? I heard he made headlines for peeing on Capitol property." The crowd burst out laughing, tension finally cracking. Jasmine smirked. "He has better instincts than some of my colleagues." This time the laugh was genuine, full, like everyone was glad for a breath of air. But even with the shift, the moment hung in the room. Something had changed, and everyone knew it as the cameras kept rolling. The room hadn't fully reset. Jimmy leaned on jokes to pull things back, but his timing was off and he knew it. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat steady as if she'd done this 100 times. "So," Jimmy said, shuffling his next card, "we've talked politics, you checked me a few times. I think I'm still recovering, but let's talk about your future. Congress today, but tomorrow, Senate, White House, Netflix special." The last bit was meant as a joke, but it landed clumsily. Jasmine chuckled, though her smile carried an edge. "Funny thing about the future," she said, "everyone thinks they know yours better than you do." Jimmy tilted his head. "Meaning? I mean, every time I step into a space like this, someone tries to write my story before I even finish a sentence. People love to skip to the end, especially with someone like me, someone like you." He asked, "Black, female, loud when? I need to be quiet when it makes people uncomfortable. Smart enough to make others feel like they have something to prove." The audience fell into a hush. Not forced, but natural, like they were listening without a laugh track to guide them. Jimmy tried again. "You've had a few viral moments already. The Oversight Committee exchange, that press conference in Dallas. I guess what I'm asking is, do you want to be seen as someone who claps back?" Jasmine leaned forward, ready to land it. "Jimmy, when you grow up being told to be twice as good, but still get talked about like you're twice as difficult to learn to choose your words. So if I give you one sentence that cuts through the noise, believe me, it's not about going viral, it's about being heard." The line hit like a gavel. Jimmy's eyes widened, not offended, but realizing he'd just been shown something he thought he understood, but didn't. The audience didn't clap right away. They didn't need to. They were watching her with more than admiration. They were watching with respect. "I'm not trying to be anyone's meme," Jasmine added. "But if one sentence makes people stop and think, even for a moment, then maybe I said what needed to be said." Jimmy set his note card face down on the desk. "Well," he said slowly. "Now you said it," Jimmy replied, his voice lower. For a moment, the room was still. Then, from the back, a single clap rang out, probably a cameraman. A few others followed, and soon the applause spread like a spark. It wasn't a standing ovation, but enough to shift the energy. Jimmy glanced at the camera, breaking format. "We'll be right back," he said, looking far more thoughtful than he had 10 minutes earlier. The screen cut to commercial, but behind the scenes, no one moved at first. Crew members whispered, a producer waved someone over with a headset. Jimmy sat in silence, lips pressed tight, replaying the last 5 minutes in his head. Across from him, Jasmine calmly reached for her water, steady as if she hadn't just flipped a late-night studio upside down with a handful of sentences. When the show returned, the mood was different. Not tense, just uncertain. The audience clapped on cue, but without the easy bounce from earlier. Some looked like they weren't sure if they were still watching a late-night comedy or something else entirely. Jimmy tried to reset. "We're back with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who just casually handed me my own show on a silver platter." He forced a chuckle, flashing a big smile. It landed decently. Jasmine smirked politely. "Just doing my civic duty this time." The audience laughed with relief, though the shift between them was clear. Jimmy sat straighter now, no longer leaning in so casually. He wasn't nervous, just aware that he'd stepped into a moment bigger than both of them. "So tell me," he said lightly, "what's something people always get wrong about you?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "That I came here to play nice." The crowd burst out laughing, not because it was a joke, but because it was true. Honesty on television always cuts deeper than punchlines. Jimmy nodded. "Fair enough, and I'll Say this: I may not agree with everything you say, but I definitely wouldn't want to debate you without a lifeline and 3 assistants. That one landed. The audience roared, and for the first time all night, Jasmine laughed fully, the kind that softened the edges of the room. The leftover tension finally cracked. From there, the conversation eased community work, her Dallas district, the bill she was pushing through Congress. But even as the show rolled on, everyone in that studio knew something had shifted, and the cameras had caught it. Jasmine spoke about expanding mental health resources for underserved neighborhoods. It wasn't fluff it mattered, but it was safer ground, the kind of segment designed for social clips without ruffling too many feathers. Still, the weight of what had happened earlier lingered. You couldn't unhear it. You couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. As the interview wrapped, Jimmy reached for something rare: sincerity. "Look, Jasmine," he said, "whatever people think about politics, what's clear is you're not afraid to be exactly who you are. And I respect that even when it scares me a little." Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Growth starts at discomfort," Jimmy chuckled. "I'll be quoting that for a week." They stood to shake hands, and something unexpected happened. The audience rose, not on cue, not signaled by the stage manager, but naturally, one by one. Some clapped, others covered their mouths in surprise. A few lifted their phones to record. Jimmy looked thrown, Jasmine looked almost amused. "Thank you," she said into the mic before walking off stage. The credits rolled over, a wide shot of the audience still standing. The band played, but softer, as if unwilling to drown out the moment. Backstage, chaos rippled. Producers whispered behind the curtain. A makeup artist kept checking her phone, wide-eyed. A young staffer with a headset leaned in, whispering, "We're trending already." Jimmy stood at a monitor, replaying the exchange in silence. Her voice echoed back, "You ever get tired of white guys calling you spicy?" He turned to his executive producer. "You think I went too far?" The producer paused. "I think you poked someone who's used to fighting battles with a microphone in one hand and her dignity in the other." Jimmy exhaled. "Yeah, and I was holding cue cards." But while he processed what had just unfolded inside that studio, the outside world was already on fire. By the time Jasmine's car pulled away from the lot, the clip had hit X, formerly Twitter, within 20 minutes. A shaky phone recording captioned, "She didn't even raise her voice." Jasmine Crockett just folded Kimmel in real time had racked up over 300,000 views. TikToks followed, dramatic edits, reaction splits, commentary. One viral post read, "I've watched this 12 times." The way she said, "Maybe that's not my problem. Maybe that's yours. That's living rent-free in my brain forever." The comment section blew up. Half the internet was cheering, the other half arguing. Finally, someone called him out without yelling. "Why bring strong women on if you're going to treat them like caricatures? It was just a joke. Get over it." He got what he deserved. By midnight, the segment had hit YouTube, not from the official channel, but through a cleaned-up bootleg with subtitles. Within 10 hours, it was the #1 trending video. By morning, it wasn't just politics junkies or late-night fans talking. It had spilled into group chats, Facebook feeds, and office coffee breaks. On The View, Anna Navarro said, "I've been in green rooms with Jasmine Crockett. That woman is not here to play checkers." ESPN Stephen A. Smith weighed in on his podcast. "Maybe it was political, maybe not, but what I saw was someone take a verbal elbow and send it right back without even standing up." Even local radio hosts in places like Flagstaff and Bakersfield slipped it in between traffic updates. Not all the attention was glowing. Conservative commentators pounced, calling her another angry Democrat, a woman throwing a tantrum on live TV. They framed it as unprofessional and disrespectful. But here was the catch: Jasmine hadn't raised her voice, hadn't insulted anyone, hadn't even shifted her tone. And that's what made it land. She let the words carry the weight, and the silence that followed was what stuck. The way Jimmy stalled, the way the crowd's laughter shifted into thought, the way the air changed live in real time. By lunchtime, major outlets were chasing her down. CNN, MSNBC, NPR, even 60 Minutes left a message. Her communications director, Andre, just stared at the pile of requests. Do we even respond? Someone asked. Jasmine looked up from her phone, calm as ever. We don't need to, not even a tweet. She smiled. I already said what I needed to say. That line itself became a headline. Jasmine Crockett responds to viral interview. I already said what I needed to say. Support poured in from every direction. Young activists praised her clarity. Older voters admired her restraint. Celebrities chimed in. Ava DuVernay called her unshakable. Kerry Washington reposted the clip with a single word, respect. Jimmy Kimmel's camp eventually issued a short statement. Not an apology, not a defense, just a note saying he valued Jasmine's candor and believed in tough, honest conversations. Some called it weak, others said it was enough. Meanwhile, the internet kept dissecting the moment from every angle. But the deeper story was still waiting to be told, the story of why one simple sentence hit so hard. Before the memes, before the headlines, before the awkward laughter and applause, there was a girl in East Dallas, sitting in the back of a classroom, raising her hand too often. That girl was Jasmine Crockett. She was the student with questions teachers didn't want to answer. The one labeled difficult for asking why the library had outdated books, or why no one ever taught them about people who looked like her. Her mom worked nights as a nurse. Her dad ran an auto shop that never seemed to close. They didn't have much, but they gave Jasmine enough to feel safe, to feel seen. What they didn't have was time, so Jasmine learned early how to stand her ground. She wasn't loud, not at first, but precise. If you tried to box her in, she wanted to know who built the box and why it only fit one kind of voice. At Prairie View A&M, she studied political science and worked 2 jobs. Her weekends were spent in debate halls, often going up against students with more money, polish, and connections, but she had something else: fire. Not the kind that flares up and dies out, but the kind that burns steady, never begging for attention. Law school sharpened her. Public defense exposed her to injustices no hashtags or headlines ever captured. She sat across from mothers begging for help in courtrooms that barely pretended to listen. She wrote motions late into the night in her one-bedroom near Duncanville, fridge buzzing in the background, and every time she spoke in court, someone called her aggressive. Every time she raised a point, she was too passionate. Every time she stood her ground, she was told she'd go further if she just smiled more. She kept the receipts not just of the words, but of the weight they carried. Every label was an attempt to shrink her, to flatten her into something dismissible. So when Jimmy Kimmel called her spicy, it wasn't just about that moment. It was about years of coded language, years of hearing the same tone in different voices, years of learning how to say, not this time. That's why her response, maybe that's not my problem, maybe that's yours, hit so hard because for too long, the burden had been on people like her to adjust, to smooth things over, to make others comfortable. Jasmine wasn't adjusting anymore. She was focused on being accurate, graceful, and clear, showing that you can correct someone without humiliating them. That's why the audience respected her. That's why the clip spread. It wasn't a gotcha, it wasn't rage. It was control, the kind that's earned through years of watching others try to tell your story for you. And it reminded people, especially women of color, that you don't have to perform softness to deserve respect. You don't have to water down your words to make people comfortable. You can be calm, you can be clear, and still shift a room with a single sentence. Andre, her comms guy, summed it up best in a late-night text. She didn't come here to trend. She came here to remind people why they listen in the first place. That's what stayed with people, not the tension, not the jokes, not even the applause, just the truth. And yet, the moment's true weight revealed itself quietly when no cameras were around. 2 days later, backstage at the El Capitan Theater, the headlines had already started to fade, the internet chasing its next viral clip. Jimmy Kimmel was prepping for that night's taping when Jasmine Crockett returned, not for an interview, but for a closed-door meeting about a community program on media literacy in underserved schools. She hadn't expected to see him, but they crossed paths in the hallway. Jimmy spotted her first. He hesitated, then stepped forward. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey," she answered, steady as ever. He paused, choosing his words carefully, not to sound polished, but to be honest, "I've been thinking about what you said that night. I think I got comfortable too comfortable." Forgot that being funny doesn't excuse being careless. Jasmine tilted her head. "You're not the first. You won't be the last. I know," he admitted. "But I don't want to be either of those things." A beat of silence, then she softened, just slightly. "Then don't be." Jimmy let out a breath, like one he'd been holding since that night. "Thanks for not torching me," he said. Jasmine smirked. "I don't torch, I clarify." This time, Jimmy truly laughed. The hallway, the lights, even the weight of the moment felt lighter. No cameras, no applause, no dramatic edits, just a people meeting in the middle. Because real growth doesn't need an audience, it just needs honesty. Later that week, Jasmine spoke at a high school in Tulsa. A student raised her hand and asked, "How do you stay calm when people try to make you small?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "You don't give them the power to define you," she said. "And remember, there's nothing louder than grace." That line ended up in a school newsletter, taped to a classroom wall. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Standing your ground doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it's simply knowing who you are when someone tries to reduce you to a sound bite. It's letting your words carry weight, not because you yell, but because you mean them. Jasmine didn't win an argument that night on Kimmel's show. She didn't humiliate anyone or try to go viral. What she did was hold space for herself, for every woman ever dismissed, for every young person told to tone it down, for everyone labeled before they even had the chance to speak. And in doing that, she reminded us, you don't have to shrink to be seen. You don't have to clap back to be clear. You don't have to fight dirty to earn respect. Sometimes one well-placed sentence can shake a room more than any performance ever could. If this story made you pause or reflect, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, speak on it, and hit that subscribe button, because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're reminders, and we need more of them.